Welcome to Mortgage Markets and More. I'm your host, Peter D'Angelo. Happy Friday, everybody. I hope you all had a great week. We're going to dive into a couple real estate updates for you. And I read a few articles I wanted to share that I thought would be appropriate right now. And first and foremost, as mentioned last week, I'm going to spend a little bit of time every Friday moving forward to talk about the National Association of Realtors settlement, any updated status on that, and some information and feedback through articles and conversations that I'm having with real estate professionals. So just to take it from the top again, there was a large settlement that was proposed last week, and it's pending approval from the Supreme Court. And at this time, right now, we are seeing that the major impacts are a $418 million settlement for damages, as well as an implementation of changes. And these are operational changes to how real estate is conducted by real estate professionals. The timeline for this looks to be around July for implementation. However, given the scope of what is changing here and the radical changes that are occurring, it could be delayed a little bit, maybe later on this year. But right now, as it stands, they're looking to target for July for these changes. Again, to recap these changes, we're talking about the lack of promotion of buyer's agent commission on the multiple listing service, MLS. We're talking about the necessity for buyer's agents now to negotiate their compensation with the sellers, or now that could fall on the buyers. We're going to get into that in a little bit, as well as, making changes so that there is not impact to low-income households to make it more fair and competitive in the market. The jury's still out, so to speak, when it comes to whether or not this is going to have a benefit to the consumer and what the implementation process is going to look like. But I wanted to go through some of the potential effects to buyers and sellers. So first and foremost is that now buyers could possibly be responsible for payment of their buyer's agent commission. That we don't know exactly how this is going to transpire. If you're currently shopping in the market right now, it's business as usual. But when these changes do take effect, that could be a material change now, where home buyers who have been saving up to put money toward their down payment could see some of that savings eaten into by having to pay a buyer's agent for their commission. This could change how much the commission is for a buyer's agent. If there is a change to the buyer's agent commission, it may not be as high as what the current commission rates are like for buyer's agents, but that's one material effect it could have for buyers. In addition to that, from a monetary side, we're also going to talk about an operational change where brokers may now be more interested in having buyers sign a contract early on that's an exclusivity representation type of contract where a buyer will sign to agree with the buyer's agent and say that you are my buyer's agent. I will be paying you commission if you don't get commission from the seller so that their fee can be collected. Having that signed early would lock them in, and then we'd see, I would anticipate buyers to be a little bit more, so to speak, loyal to one agent that is going to be their professional looking for the property that is right for them and their family. That's the operational side. There's that monetary impact. We'll see how all of this plays out. I've heard competing thoughts on both sides saying that this could create an environment where there's less competition as far as how many real estate agents are going to be in the industry. This could push a lot out. We're talking about some preliminary estimates of a third of the commissions that are normally received in the real estate industry annually could be slashed by these changes. So there's quite a wide amount of impact that we're going to have to see. I will keep you updated as much as possible on that. But I thought it would be helpful to do one little thought exercise to illustrate the impact that this could have financially for prospective home buyers under this new framework that the National Association of Realtors is proposing through this settlement. Median sales price is at $417,700 right now. The average commission rate in 2023 was 5.37%, that commission rate, 5.37% in the old framework, how business is being conducted, is very likely and most commonly being paid by the seller out of the proceeds of the sale of the property for the compensation for both the buyer's agent and the listing or seller's agent. So that 5.37 gets chopped in half in most cases. If that is the maintained commission structure in this new framework, using that 5.37% number for the median sales price of $417,700, we could be looking at buyers needing to pay $11,215 for their buyer's agent commission if the seller is not going to be picking up as they currently do. Most local real estate boards, from what I see here in North Jersey and from talking to other professionals, they're still keeping some sort of structure where a buyer's agent can collect their compensation from the seller. However, this settlement is changing things, and we could see the, more online listings come up, other platforms for people to list their homes. This is starting to create an interesting environment that we're going to have to see how these things play out. What was very interesting too is something like Zillow, which is, somewhere that everyone goes or most people go to check out to see homes that are listed for sale. Zillow stock plunged after the news of the National Association of Realtors, and it kind of made me scratch my head a little bit, because you would think that with these broad changes happening, something like Zillow could be well positioned for possibly taking advantage of the circumstances, because they are an online marketplace for homes. It does harvest information from the multiple listing service, the MLS, and real estate agents currently leverage Zillow and Trulia and other online listing websites where people can shop for homes. I would think that they would be able to take advantage of an opportunity like this, but their stock plunged. We'll see if that changes things in the future. And also, this comes to question that the multiple listing service may not be the end-all be-all for much longer, because if the MLS now is not permitting you to promote buyer's agency commissions, if it is creating this new world for real estate agents to operate in, we could see replacements for that. I mentioned on a previous podcast that there is one, the American Real Estate Association area, that is something that was announced at Inman a couple months ago. And Inman is a industry aggregate of news and the latest and greatest. It's something I subscribe to and look at pretty intently. And there's a gentleman who was promoting that this is going to possibly be a competitor for the MLS. And I anticipate we could possibly see some more of that. I also wanted to give some advice. So first and foremost, if you're using an agent, particularly if you're a first-time home buyer, using a real estate agent to represent you as a buyer is still highly encouraged. You really do benefit from having that professional there to guide you through your first steps of purchasing a home as a first-time home buyer. So I believe that there's still a tremendous value. And all of this question about commission means value, right? We're talking about how much value am I getting out of this professional who's trying to help me? And I do still see a high value in having a real estate professional both list your property. I know on the listing side, it's kind of insulated from these changes, but on the buyer's side, you still can really benefit from a buyer's agent. We may see some changes with how buyer's agency operates. It may not operate the same way that it does. I've read some articles and heard some commentary about some flat fee structures for buyer's agents. That could be in the mix, which would mean you would just be paying a buyer's agent a flat fee regardless of the home price that you're going to be shopping in. That could be something that's cost effective for buyers. But still, I just wanted to encourage people to still seek the help of a real estate professional if you are looking to purchase. The other piece of advice is for real estate agents, my real estate agents out there. It's going to be really important to stay on top of these changes and understand how they are going to impact the practicality of your business, how you're running your business every day, and what you can do to stay ahead so that you have sustainability in your career, as well as be an informed person because this is hitting the news in such a large fashion right now. I can't turn on the TV, scroll online, read news articles without seeing something pop up about this settlement. So this conversation has been lifted to a higher level now. More eyes are on it. More people are talking about it. I know from my experience, I'm talking to more clients about this and they have more questions about it. So being informed is definitely a piece of advice to make sure that you are in the loop on what's going on and can speak intelligently to it. That's also part of my goal here in providing you these updates on Fridays, particularly talking about the National Association of Realtors settlement and any updates thereafter. Now, I did read another article that I thought was very interesting, and we all know that there's an affordability crisis in the country right now. Some markets are different than others. I know that I am positioned in North Jersey. That's where the lion's share of my business is, but I do business out of state. And in New Jersey, it's extremely competitive because supply and demand economics are winning out. There's a very low supply and an incredibly high demand. This is keeping values higher. There are other markets, like in Florida, that it's softer. Negotiating still occurs when you're trying to buy property because there's more inventory and there is more available. I heard about Austin. There was a Wall Street Journal article that was written about Austin, Texas, kind of going in reverse now from the growth. But quite frankly, if you look at the numbers, look at the information that's available, I don't particularly agree. I think it's still a strong market. It's just that it's becoming slightly more affordable, but we're talking about a 9% drop in rent. That's what the article had mentioned, 9% drop in rent prices, but this is on the heels of almost over a 20% increase over the past few years since the pandemic, when there was a huge influx of people moving to Austin. So the devil's in the details. And the more you drill down, the better informed you're going to be, and you can form your own opinion as to what's going on. This, though, that I wanted to talk about was comparing real estate prices now and going back to the 1960s. And here's some key factors from a study that was completed, and this is as per CNBC. Home prices versus inflation growth. We have seen home prices increase 2.4 times as fast as inflation has grown since the 1960s. The hypothetical versus the actual median price, just to show you, and this is going to be a little bit painful to hear, but I wanted to share it because I thought it was very interesting. So if home prices had risen with inflation since 1963, the median home price right now would be $177,511 compared to what we just talked about, $417,700. So there's quite a disparity here. So inflation's going, up, but home prices just over, since 1960 have just skyrocketed long term. Anyone who has concerns, the reason why I'm bringing this up is people who are buying now are concerned, oh no, is the bottom going to fall out? Are we going to see real estate prices come down? This is starting to make a stronger case that probably not. It's very difficult to hang your hat, and I am in no way trying to position myself as someone who knows where real estate value is going. I can just do my best with the trends and the data we have available. And quite frankly, right now, I don't see how real estate values can come down in the next 5 to 10 years and beyond. Mainly because I have the opinion right now that buyer demand is so high, and I'm talking locally in my market, but I think this also holds up for the whole country. Buyer demand is so high, and I don't see how long it's going to take. It's really tough to determine how long it's going to take for the supply to meet the demand, if ever. And that's a crazy concept to wrap your head around. But because of that, that gives me the strength, in my opinion, to say that I think home values are going to be rather resilient, as our economy has been over the past couple of years, with respect to going through the pandemic and going through a high inflation environment. The economy is still doing tremendously well, albeit the charge is led by a lot of tech innovation. And that's, if we're talking about the stock market, that's part of a huge component of what's pushing the stock market to break the records. Like I mentioned on earlier podcasts, as of March 1st, having 15 record closes for the S&P 500 is bonkers. That, it doesn't look like there's any softening happening in the market. And that means that, The Fed is likely not going to be raising interest rates. I'll get to that real quickly at the end. But I want to get back to this study, comparing real estate going all the way back to the 1960s. So as I mentioned, supply and demand is a huge component of that. Also, the construction time takes about 9.6 months to build a single-family home in the U.S. right now. That's the average. Beyond that, when you have the opportunity to build, it takes 9.6 months on average. However, how much space there is to build, I live in North Jersey. We're pretty saturated. There's not a lot of opportunity to build to help meet demand unless you go to some more remote places in the state where there's more land available, and then you're still talking about having to wait 9.6 months on average for that home to be built to meet demand. So there's a bit of a lag that's happening there too. This is an opposite. This is an inverse from what we saw in the real estate market after the 2008 crash, almost a perfect inverse scenario. There was a huge influx of supply, and then demand dropped like a stone when we hit the Great Recession. Now we have the opposite happening. We have incredibly high demand and incredibly low inventory. So these supply and demand economics are what is paving the way for this crazy run up on home values throughout the country. As I mentioned, there's an affordability crisis that is currently ongoing for prospective home buyers. But beyond that, there are also some political things in the works and some societal context to be considerate of here to see how this is playing out. You know, right now, there's a proposed budget to cut housing costs by the current administration in Washington. We'll see how that could possibly affect things. And then also manufactured homes. So a manufactured home is essentially something that's prefabricated. A prefab or manufactured home is something that gets kind of warehouse built and then gets delivered and then plopped on fixed foundation. From a financing side, there's other implications for that, which I won't get into, but suffice it to say, manufactured housing is something that's becoming more popular now because of a cheap cost of construction, as well as an ease of setting up the property wherever it is that you want to build. With the higher prices for different things like lumber and construction costs, which softened a bit since the peak when we saw inflation running close to 9% back in 2022, we have seen things cool off a bit, but still, to construct is very expensive. So manufactured homes seem to be filling a gap there a little bit. The implications for home buyers is that there is still an increased difficulty in finding a home. Because the inventory is so low, that increased difficulty is playing out. Affordability is part of that. Supply and demand is part of that. High level of competition. On the plus side, there could be some relief on the horizon, and I think that it's going to take, in my opinion, it's going to take some government policies and or programs to help support really the generation, for lack of a better term, the generation that got the short end of the stick. Because there's the younger generation now, when they entered into the workforce, when they entered into the time in their life where otherwise their parents were buying their first home, they're stuck. They're stuck because of the high competition. They're stuck because of the high home values. They're stuck because interest rates are at record highs for the past 3 decades. So even though the average mortgage interest rate throughout the history in the U.S., that sits around 7.6%. We haven't seen this. And having that as the average looking long-term gives you one piece of the picture. But looking now, pairing the high rate environment with high inflation, with the cost it is to go out to eat or buy groceries, all of these things affect the American consumer's pocket and doesn't leave a lot of room when it comes to their ability to buy a home. So I hope you found all this information useful today about the latest and greatest in real estate, the National Association of Realtors settlement, as well as this little case study comparing the 1960s real estate to today's. And I think this is really important to keep our eye on the ball, because as these changes occur and as we look forward to how the rest of this year is going to play out, the more informed we stay, the better we are going to be positioned to make the right decision for ourselves as consumers, as well as real estate professionals, for our clients so that we can do the best job for them. Just briefly, I want to touch upon the fact that the Fed did not make any changes to their interest rate. We're going to dive a little bit more deeply in on Monday with our mortgage update on what Fed Chair Jerome Powell's comments were, as well as what his responses to questioning were looking like. And right now we're seeing mortgage interest rates kind of holding out, tickling the 7% plus or minus, depending on your scenario. So we'll see how things play out over the next couple of weeks. The important note now, though, as we head into the weekend, is the fact that the Fed is not meeting next month. So we've got roughly 60 days, a little less than 60 days, of the market just kind of moving on its own. So be prepared. If there's any data that comes out regarding inflation or any home sales data that comes out, it could have an impact because the market's just running on its own without any commentary from the Fed for a little bit. So bear that in mind. That's it for me today. I hope you found this helpful and useful. I encourage you to share the show with anybody that would benefit from having this information on a regular basis. You're encouraged to reach out to me. Shoot me an email, text message, call me, find me on socials. Everything's in the episode description. Would love to hear from you. If there's anything that you want to hear about in particular, I would love to focus on that and provide you with that information on future episodes. I look forward to seeing you all on Monday. Make it an awesome weekend and take good care.